Buenos días, Dr. Margarita Vargas-Betancourt. You are the librarian in charge of Latin American and Caribbean collections, special collections at the University of Florida's Smathers Libraries. And welcome to Conversatorio Cubano.
Thank you. It's a great honor to be here, Professor Guerra.
Well, it has been wonderful to have the opportunity to work with you over the years. And I know that much of what you do is in part to discover the hidden history of Cuba and Cubans through objects, through documents, archives, oral histories, all kinds of different materials. So I wonder if you could share with us what you consider to be one or two of these discoveries that you've made as a librarian, as an archivist, and also as a historian, because that's important. Usually those two things do not combine. And so we are very lucky to have you because you are both a specialist of libraries and archives and a user. So please, tell us something about what you found how many years has it been you've been here now?
I've been here 14 years.
14 years.
And I met you during my interview.
Yes.
So we've worked together for a long time. It's been a long time and a great pleasure.
Yeah. So you asked me what are my favorite items, and the way I think about it is like if there was a fire, what would I go into the stacks to take out and to save? And that one is just one. Well, the one thing I could take out is Versos Sencillos by José Martí, signed to Carmita, and the autograph says a Carmita, para que nunca dé una pena. Su amigo calvo, José Martí, 1891. So this is like something that he's dedicating to his supposed or purported or accepted, you are the Cuban expert, lover in New York, who was the mother of his daughter. And we got that, when I got here, they always showed it to me as the treasure. But what they did not tell me is that it was part of a big collection, a donation that had come in the 90s, and that when I got here had not been processed. That was a surprise to me that it had not been processed, and that it had also been pulled apart. So we had the book, which became like a treasure of the collection. There were a lot of letters. And through those letters, going over the letters and reading each letter, I found out that it had been an entire collection, a collection that was made up by the book, the letters, a facsimile that the National Archive of Cuba made when Maria Mantilla, José Martí's daughter, donated to them the original letters that she had gotten from her father. They created this facsimile, taking photographs of each of the letters, and they gave it to her. So there's only one facsimile, and it's hers. And we got it in the 1990s when one of her sons died. That son was Cesar Romero, who used to play Batman back in the 60s. When he died, his brother donated the collection to UF. So it's the grandchildren of José Martí donating these things, and it also included books, and they were signed and autographed, and they had been dispersed. They're part of the Special Collections Rare Book Collection now, the LACC Rare Books. So what I did is I located everything, and even if just intellectually, put everything together. So now we have two things: the Versos Sencillos, the book, which is also digital. You can find it in DLOC, in the Digital Library of the Caribbean. It's open access. And we have the Romero family papers regarding José Martí, which is not a huge collection in terms of size. It is one archival box, but in terms of significance, it is absolutely amazing. And we just closed an exhibit. It was called Tesoros de una Biblioteca, and it featured these books and the facsimile. And it also featured one of the letters that Maria Mantilla received, because the letters that make up the collection are the letters that the Cuban government wrote to Maria Mantilla when they were organizing the centennial for José Martí in Cuba. So one of those letters included like a diagram and an illustration of how the Biblioteca Nacional José Martí was going to look like. And for me, that was really cool because, as you know well, because we went together to Cuba in 2012, we went to the National Library. So many years after, we saw how that idea was was true. It became a reality. And that letter with that diagram was exhibited in the Tesoros de una Biblioteca, José Martí.
You know, I remember, and I may be wrong in this, that one of the items in that collection in the Romero family papers is a number of letters, correspondence about the filming of a story that was a movie, Cuban-made movie about José Martí's life in Mexico. And there was quite a bit of objection to the way in which the film was going to be made, the storyline. And this was all, as you say, part of this 100-year anniversary of the birth of José Martí that was supposed to be celebrated under a constitutional government in Cuba, and instead fell to the dictator Fulgencio Batista, who took power in 52. So this is 1953. Centennial. I wonder, do you know about my recollection about the correspondence regarding the film?
I mean, I do remember it, but I remember it through another lens because I'm Mexican.
Yeah.
So I remember that one of the objections was that they were choosing Mexican actors to portray José Martí and all of these Cuban characters. And I do remember that very clearly because it's usually for me, the recollection, or I compare it to the fact that it's American actors who usually play Mexican protagonists.
Yeah.
Like Zapata and that kind of stuff. So this was another type of, I don't know, colonialism or imperialism. And I never think of Mexico as an imperial power, but I guess sometimes it is reflected in that way. So, but that's what I remember about that letter.
Yes.
And I don't know what happened. Like, I don't know, like, what happened with that movie.
Well, it's not considered a good movie. We'll just leave it there.
But it was made.
It was made, and so far as I know, it isn't widely available, but you can see it. And certainly there are parts of it I know that you can find on YouTube. I will follow up on that because, in fact, for other parts of the website, where Gems of the Archive, we have the opportunity to provide clips. We have the opportunity to provide more resources, and it would be a really interesting addition to this conversation to include that, or the letter itself, because that's the best part about being at the University of Florida, rolling down the steps and into the library, and service is quick, and these materials are really just treasures, priceless treasures that everybody can see.
And this collection, because of its importance, has been digitized completely, so it's available in DLOC. Open access again. So you can find the letter, everything is there. Even the memento, the photos of José Martí, and I think there were some keys. Those I don't remember if those were digitized. But at least the photos and all of the letters have been digitized. And the facsimile.
So the keys, and this will definitely inspire us to make sure that we follow up on this. The keys are to the shackles that Martí wore on his ankles when he was imprisoned as a young man, about 16 years old, by the Spanish government for having written essays that were ostensibly private and to his personal tutor, but which endorsed Spanish independence. And his father was an officer of the Spanish military. He was also a slave owner, as Maria Iglesias, a historian at Harvard, has recently published. And so for all those reasons, the shackles had tremendous weight and value and importance to the nation. And Maria Mantilla, his daughter, brought them to Cuba, donated them, but then she kept the keys that had been made, I think, posthumously. And those are here, which is also a fabulous link to Cuba that we have.
Yeah. So that's what I would go into the stacks to take out if there was a fire.
Yes. So the next question I think that I want to ask is about the role of academic libraries, because I think a lot of those who might visit this site and in the general public have been to their public libraries and have a relationship with their public libraries, but do not have a real clear sense of what the role of an academic library is, especially at a public institution. And I think that too often in general, face folks who believe it's some kind of a warehouse rather than a laboratory of ideas, a portal into the past. I mean, there are many different metaphors that I would use to describe what a library like ours means. But what would you say is the role of an academic library at a public institution?
I'm going to take your question and talk about the specificity of LACC.
Yes.
Because I think that there's some academic libraries and there are others like LACC that are a bit different. So what I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history of LACC and the significance. So there's 3 libraries in the US, 3 academic libraries that have a separate space for Latin America. The Nettie Lee Benson Library at UT Austin, the Latin American Library at Tulane, and us, and that's it.
Good.
For example, Harvard, Berkeley, New Mexico, all of the other libraries have Latin American content, but it is shelved with the rest of the collection. So it's not separate. And those 3, I think they're very special because the 3 libraries have a very, very strong connection, historical, but also administrative, financially, with the Center for Latin American Studies at each institution. Mm-hmm. And those 3 centers for Latin American Studies are probably the strongest in the US, if not the strongest among the strongest 5. So the history of LACC was connected to the center. The Institute of Inter-American Studies was founded in 1931 at UF by President Turlington. And President Turlington wanted this center because he thought that Florida was very connected to Latin America, especially the Caribbean. So that's when librarians here started collecting about the Caribbean and about Latin America. In 1951, after World War II, librarians in the US made a plan called Farmington Plan. And the Farmington Plan, it was made on the assumption that not even the Library of Congress, not one library in the US could collect all of the content generated in the world, all of the books published in the world. And so they decided that different institutions would have an expertise in different areas. So, for example, the Nettie Lee Benson Library specializes in Mexico and South America and all of Latin America, but those would be their strengths. Tulane is Mexico and Central America, and Florida is the Caribbean. So, and the idea was that for the US to be an hegemonic power, they had to be exposed to knowledge produced in the world. So that was the basis of the Farmington Plan. So it is an imperial project, but interesting. And so in 1951, UF became like the official repository of the Caribbean. And since then, that has been like one of our missions here. So that mission is not only to UF, to you as the professor of Cuban studies or to the students who do Cuba, but also to researchers in the world. We are the repository of the Caribbean, not only Cuba, all of the Caribbean, but of course, given that this is Florida, Cuba is one of our strengths. Mm-hmm. It's not the only one. The other ones would be Haiti. We're one of the strongest repositories of Haitian material. Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, and even the non-Spanish Caribbean. We also collect on that. Yeah. So in that way, we're very, very important in supporting the research of Caribbean all over the world. Now, in terms of an academic libraries, and one of their strongest missions is to support the mission of the university. So here we support your work, the work of faculty, the work of researchers at UF, and the very important work and education of students, graduate and undergraduate. So that could be like perhaps one of the biggest difference with public libraries, that we don't specialize in such a broad audience. It's more like the one that is here studying, in addition to the specialized one of researchers. And perhaps I would like to end that, this is more like personal. For me, it has been very, go back to LACC. LACC is made up of 2 parts, the circulating collection and the special collections. The circulating collection is books that students or faculty can check out and take home. And that part of the collection supports 200 plus faculty who teach Latin American studies. So it specializes in every country. We usually see what faculty are doing, and that's how we buy books. Yeah. The special collections, it's mostly Caribbean. That's the strength. Like we will receive donations from Uruguay or Paraguay, if we have a donor who has an important collection, we will accept it. But that's not the main focus. The main focus is Cuba and the Caribbean. Lately, Brazil has become super strong in terms of special collections and in terms of circulating collections. Panama also, because of another collection, the Panama Canal Museum collection. And I will say a little bit, we will never compete with Tulane or Texas, but we have gotten more and more collections on Mexico because we have had just very recently, the last 2 years, professors who do Mexico and because I do Mexico too.
Okay. Yes. So, I mean, I think probably you are one of the best voices to speak about the challenges that researchers who work on Cuba face, some of which are unique and some of which are not, to those who study any part of Latin America. You went to Cuba, as you said, in 2012. So you have also seen the conditions that Cubans on the island and those of us who travel there face. It's obviously become increasingly difficult to travel there, both legally and for material reasons on the island. It's difficult, and it's always been difficult, but perhaps now more than ever. So I wonder if you could talk about what you think are the major sort of unexpected and also expected challenges that scholars as researchers face when they try to study Cuba in University of Florida settings or just in general, because I think we face as Latin Americanists something or a set of obstacles that those who perhaps work on the United States do not, or those who work on France do not. So maybe you could talk about those challenges as you've seen them.
I mean, there are many things, but perhaps the one that surprised me the most, and it's also not surprising, but it is surprising at the same time, was how not having good internet impacts the access to knowledge. And that's surprising because at this point we don't even think about it. It's kind of like breathing oxygen or drinking water, or electricity. Which was another surprising thing, how dark Cuba is, and how bright the stars are because of that. That surprised me a lot. Yes, that's probably what really impacted me. Internet and I guess electricity. The obvious obstacles, I guess, it's the lack of ability to travel to the US or to other institutes here. Cubans cannot easily come to use our collections or even the collections in Miami, and they're very rich collections. So they seem to be out of reach. That's also because of lack of funds, and that brings together Cuba to the other Latin American scholars. It's not easy for them to come here. Perhaps the other obstacle is visa. If you don't have a visa, you cannot enter the country. And that, again, brings together Cubans and other Latin Americans because the U.S. has increasingly made it difficult to come here to do research or to study. But in terms in Cuba, in terms of research in Cuba and using libraries in Cuba, I think that the strongest obstacle is censorship, the lack of willingness of the government to have its citizens access knowledge, because that's what you need to do to not have democracy, right? To have a dictatorship in place for years and years and years and years to be. So I would say that's the most important, even more than internet or funds or ability to travel or anything, the censorship and the authoritarianism of the government, which is not surprising, I guess.
Yeah. I think that what you bring up here in terms of the various factors that contribute to the episodic at times, false at times, or just absent history that we have about Cuba, whether it's produced here or it's produced there. I mean, to say that there is an absent history, I think that many, many Cubans are unaware on the island of how they've gotten to year 66 of this regime, and that they might remain unaware of that, for decades to come, I think is not just tragic, but really, really scary for all of us because as the last few years have presented challenges Cuba has not faced economically since the early 90s when suddenly the Soviet Union collapsed and disappeared. What we are doing is in so many ways, whether we are doing so intentionally or not, but we are surpassing and superseding what is possible for an island historian or an average islander to know, to reach about themselves and their own history. And that creates, again, whether we wanted to or not, a divide, which is also rooted in power. And a power differential that becomes increasingly harder to overcome the longer that it endures. So I want to thank you for all that you did to create the exchanges that we had with the university and Cuba's National Library. We also reached out to other organizations in Cuba, but the greatest impact that University of Florida had was undoubtedly at the National Library, which is the premier institution in Cuba, the most committed to preserving and to expanding knowledge of Cuba. So thank you, Dr. Vargas-Betancourt, for joining us and for your wonderful perspective on everything and all the work that you do.
No, thank you very much for inviting me.